Hey, Mike Edwards here with Leading for Change, and I'm here with my very good friends, Susan and Andrew, coming to us live all the way from the East Coast of Canada. And we're here to talk about a really important topic. But before we go there, let's first introduce here. Susan, why don't you take a moment and just introduce who are you?
Okay, I'm having trouble deciding who I am these days because I recently retired, and that's a whole new chapter starting. But my name is Susan Johnston. I have formerly been a journalist. I've most recently been a trainer of coaches. I've been part of the business world for a long, long time. My biggest interest is always communication, and that's where a lot of this trust stuff begins. So
Absolutely. Thank you. Andrew.
I'm Andrew Annett. I'm also mostly retired, but a lot of time helping teams and organizations improve delivery of product and generally the way in which they work together. I'm still very interested in this topic. I just spend less and less time working with teams at the moment.
Awesome. And you two are in Prince Edward Island, living on the shore, basically.
yeah,
That's us.
And is the lobster any good now?
It is.
Yeah.
It is. The season's been open for a month now.
Yeah. And the oysters are fresh. Yesterday, fresh haddock. So we're good.
I am not going to lie that I'm just a lot jealous about that. So.
Come on down.
Give me a moment. I'll be right there, so to say. So for everybody, what was it, Susan? About 2 weeks ago, you posted this article, roughly, on social media, and this article talks about how employers are surveilling their employees, Bossware per se, and I'm just going to touch on a couple parts of the article here, and read a couple parts, and as I do that, let me actually put a link up in case somebody wants to go see the full article. Couple things here. Absolutely. It starts off working from home. Finally, you're out of the boss's sight, or are you? It turns out your employers can see more of what you do on your computer than you might expect. Hopefully, you figured out it's best to keep your work computer for work only. But for lockdown and the sudden turn to remote working, even though we're 2 years into it here, many pros are using their personal computer for company business. And whichever device you use to log into work, your boss will have access to at least some of your data. I would change that a bit to say your boss might if he chooses to.
Yeah.
The COVID-19 pandemic has revolutionized the way we work, and the shift towards remote working has led us to a rise in companies keeping track of their employees' productivity through various tools and software, leading to some serious privacy concerns. And then there's a couple stats that really jump out at me. 1 in 5 businesses are doing this. They're using some kind of app or program to track their employees. 62% of C-level execs said that their organizations are using new technologies to collect data on their people and insights into productivity. 48% of workers said that introducing monitoring software would damage their relationship with their manager. And then the article goes on and it talks about how do they monitor. And there's a few here. There's a few that I went, yeah, okay, this doesn't surprise me. Internet monitoring, right? Like what websites are you going to? Email monitoring. There was a couple, I think they've been around for a very long time. And they didn't surprise me. But then there's some other ones which, quite frankly, almost scared me, right? In terms of privacy, live video feeds and playback. Bossware allows employers to access and watch a live stream of your screen.
Yeah.
Webcams and microphones, software that allows employers to secretly activate inbuilt webcams and microphones on your devices.
Yeah. So it's really interesting to me because I started teleworking back when teleworking wasn't a thing. I was working at one of the big banks in Canada, and we didn't want to fire people, so we stopped paying rent. Basically, that's the short version of it, and we let people work from home. And the only reason this worked, and this is the 90s, right? We didn't even have the internet. We had some sort of IBM system that let us talk to each other, but you know, it was very primitive software in those days. But the reason we were able to do this was that we trusted our employees. We knew they were smart. We had hired them for those reasons. We knew at the end of the day what they had produced. And if we had ever gone into sort of monitoring keystrokes, or you know, how many times did they get up and leave their machine, would never have worked. And so I guess as teleworking or remote working or work from home or whatever we've been calling it evolved, these tools came along to monitor, but to some degree they feel like the boss doesn't trust me. And if the boss doesn't trust me, why should I trust them, right?
Mhm.
And you know, the beginning of these softwares was to prevent people from going to dangerous sites, right, where there might be compromised security, blah blah blah.
Yes.
I'd be very interested in monitoring the bosses to see whether they're doing insider trading, frankly.
That's another whole video cast.
but the things that they now can measure, because they can, you know, there's a whole bunch of stuff about, you know, should they? The whole ethical thing comes up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think hidden in that statement is something that's really crucial to this whole evolution of this software, and it's a lot of it is being done because it can be done.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do this, so let's justify a reason for doing it, or make up some marketing support for this capability that will appeal to people who aren't willing to do other things. We're doing it because we can.
Yeah. I went to some of the sales pages for some of these softwares, and they talk about how to sell this idea to your employees so that they see the benefit for them.
Yeah, and the key word there being sell it, right? To sell them.
Yeah.
And which to me says, if you're selling them, is there trust?
But, you know, it's easy to pick on Bossware and that ilk of software, but these very same capabilities are embedded in a lot of the software that is regularly rolled out inside of corporations. So Microsoft Teams, for example, you're able to monitor all kinds of employee activity and how long people have been logged in, when they logged in, when they logged out, where they're going, and how often they've contributed to conversation that's happening in Teams. All of that stuff.
Google Suites too, do you think?
I can't imagine not.
Yeah, it could become table stakes for any one of these companies, you know, to have those kinds of things. So you're speaking to an upside there, Andrew. So what are the upsides that we see in these things?
Frankly, I don't see any.
I see one. If we're measuring productivity by, you know, how fast are they typing, or how often are they typing, or how often are they communicating with each other, all it can show us when your peak times are, or when your slack times are, or when you're losing energy or something like that. I could see it, you know, if I wanted to measure my own productivity, to argue that, yeah, it's okay for me to be working at 9 o'clock at night because I really suck at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. You know, that could be valuable. So there may be some sort of scientific basis for measuring when people are successful, but
to me,
that's the only one I can see.
It's pretty tenuous. All of these things have two sides, right?
Yes.
Slack, wonderful tool, great for conversations, but you know, I've talked to people who said, I used to have one email inbox and now I've got 50 because I'm on Slack.
Yeah.
So it can become overwhelming and dysfunctional. So all of these tools have some benefits, and all of them come with some costs. But Bossware and these kinds of things just seem like egregious violations of privacy.
Yeah. So back to the whole meaning of what does it mean to trust? What does it mean to trust?
Yeah, great question. I was just sitting there myself. So how do you two define trust?
So mine is kind of simple.
Mine is not.
Okay. Well, I'll go first then.
Andrew, that's why we love you, so it's all good.
Mine is that you tell me what you're going to do and then you do it. I think the whole creation of expectation is really part of that too. It isn't just do what you said you do. It's like, make it really clear to me about what you're going to do, because if that's not there, then I don't know what to expect. But yeah, let me know what you're going to do really clearly and then do it.
So fundamentally, we agree. Because for me, trust is fundamentally a human thing, and it exists because we have these commitments that we create through conversation, and we take actions, and these commitments are met or not. And so that's the heart of trust. I think where I have trouble talking to people about trust is when they talk about it as some not associated with this agency of being able to choose to do something and fulfill a commitment. They talk about it as an object almost, and it's fragile and it's broken and it's binary. So you either have trust or you don't have trust, or you have trust and then it's broken and it's all shattered on the floor. All of that whole metaphor of a fragile thing that is trust just doesn't register for me. For me, it's much more it's a relationship. It's an artifact of relationship.
Yes.
And it's not so much broken as it gets breached, it gets eroded.
Yes.
And that's just life.
And the thing about trust is the more you do it, the more it grows. And it's the same with mistrust. The more we have mistrust, the more it's growing too. So I used to say when I was training coaches, with trust, somebody's got to go first, or might as well be me. And that way, it kind of builds that that feeling. You know, somebody.
I agree.
It grows from trust, starting as a seed, right?
I love how Brene Brown describes it. Like, she describes it like a jar of marbles.
Yeah.
And you know, every time you do something to earn trust, and we're all on the same page, trust is the result of a commitment that's kept, right? Or met, or whatever you want to say there. And you add a marble. And when you don't meet that commitment, we take a marble out.
Yeah.
Right.
It grows or it doesn't.
Exactly. And you know, through time, you can either fill that jar or empty the jar. Yeah. Depending which direction you're going. So just go ahead. Go ahead.
About that before we move too far from Susan's seed idea. And for me, the seed of trust is generosity, because we give trust. It doesn't come out of nowhere. Somebody gives trust, and if they're feeling generous, they will trust. And if that gets eroded over time, people become less generous. They become selfish. Mm-hmm. So to me, the flip side of generosity and trusting is selfishness and distrusting. So your world closes in with that.
It removes marbles.
So
I would agree.
I like the marble in a jar metaphor, but it can also lead to dysfunctional behavior where, you know, you have a manager who says, you have to earn my trust. So I'm going to give you this task, and you're going to do it exactly like I tell you to do it, and I'm going to, you know, inspect it. And
so you're making it transactional.
If you behave exactly as I want, then you're going to like move up my trust ladder a little bit.
Right.
And then we'll keep doing that until you're able to have agency on your own and I don't need to check up on you because I know you're going to do it exactly the way that I would do it. So this is earning trust? I don't think so. This is learning obedience.
Yes.
And not being punished for it. So and I'm not saying that all people who talk about earning trust behave this way, but many do.
Yes.
And so the whole earning trust thing is a little, you got to look at it hard.
We've all seen it, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So we have one person who's watching who commented here, Chris Williams. He says, "Great topic, guys. Nice to see you, Sue." Which makes me go, if anybody's watching this live, feel free to comment and ask questions or thoughts or contribute as
Chris
we
is
go.
really badass. So
Yeah, I know he is. I love his podcast. If anybody's watching and you haven't seen it, check out the podcast is titled Badass Agile, correct? Yeah, I wanted to make sure I got that correct. So yeah, check out Chris's podcast. It's great.
Yeah. So one of the things I did when I knew that I'd be talking to you guys about trust was that I went down many rabbit holes around trust and around Bossware, and I found an article from the Harvard Business Review, and it was from some years ago, but it was really interesting to me because he talked about how mice will share their food if there's lots of oxytocin around, so they're unstressed. And so he said, will this work with people? So we tried to put people into situations where they're getting doses of oxytocin and they're feeling unstressed and they become more generous, blah, blah, blah. So it's an interesting thing. It was called Neuroscience of Trust. But what was interesting to me about it, he moved on from his study to what are the things that we think we can do to build trust? Recognize excellence, introduce team things, give people discretion about how they work, share info, and show some vulnerability. And all that I could think of when I was reading that was SCARF, something a lot of coaches are familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
Status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, fairness. And a lot of those Bossware type things suggest an absence of, if not all, most of those things, right?
Yeah, I would agree. It almost feels like they're at opposite ends of the spectrum. You know, I love that you brought SCARF into this. You know, it's at one end because that's about connection and relatedness and all those things, right? And is that tough to do in this remote world? Absolutely. It's tougher than when you can walk across the office. Far from impossible. And yet so many managers are going, or organizations are going the other way.
Yeah.
Right?
This whole monitoring is really weird. So if I think back to my early days of teleworking, I had 10 employees working for me, and I called them every day to check in, but not to check up.
Mm-hmm.
And that way they knew somebody cared, because I was very concerned about them feeling invisible. And my boss called me as well. So, you know, and there was a lot about the human connection that was really important there to have them do their work. And in that same time frame, my boss's boss, every once in a while, if I sent him an email late at night, he would send me one back saying, "What the hell are you doing up this hour doing work for us?" And that again was a concern for the human, as opposed to, "Yay, you got that done, and we're going to make our deadline," right?
Yeah.
Which to me really reinforces this notion that trust is an emotional skill.
Ooh.
And it's one that can be taught. You exercise the skill or you let it atrophy. And I think absence of that skill in managers is what leads to support for things like Bossware and other things that are more mechanical. I can just put this in place and I can generate some metrics and we can build some pretty graphs and we can see how engaged and loyal and effective our employees are just by looking at these.
And I can prove that I'm a really good vice president.
So it's an interesting idea that people want to toy around with, trust as an emotional skill.
One of the many things I read in the last few days was that humans are basically inclined to trust. You know, there's been a lot of psychological and sociological studies that have shown that. So if that's a natural instinct for us, this whole mistrust thing is a learned behavior. How do we learn it? Why do we learn it?
And when I think of Bossware, I think that's it right there for me. It feels rooted in mistrust.
Yeah.
As opposed to trust, which I find very interesting, right? Because in order to move ahead, in order to really help people flourish and do great stuff, it has to be rooted in trust. And yet here we are going towards mistrust.
Yeah.
Well, the second you need to do something that you can't do alone,
you gotta trust somebody.
Just trust yourself. So that's why this subject is so wrapped up with collaboration and teamwork and organizational effectiveness, because it's just the network of commitments that people build to work together. And I suppose you could get introspective and say, well, if I'm a solo agent, what I really need is self-trust.
Whoa, there's a whole other
I don't want to go down that.
That's another video cast.
Yeah, we did that last night.
But for those of us who are interested in how teams work together effectively, you can't not be concerned about effective conversations around trust.
I would agree. Yeah. Between all the players, the leader and the team members, that effective conversation has to be there. And you're right, Andrew, that self-trust is where it all begins. But if we can't get beyond that, if all we do is stay stuck in our self-trust, then we're going to have a lot of trouble in the level of trust that exists in the room.
And that's where the I might as well do it myself thing comes in, because I trust me to do it right. But
yeah. So when it comes to Bossware,
I don't do the laundry.
We could just go down rabbit holes all day long.
They're everywhere.
Yes. When it comes to Bossware, like, what do we make up to be the impact of it, right? Like, especially some of the more extreme forms, the video monitoring and such.
So I know if I were in a place where I knew they were using it, or I suspected that they were using it, my first instinct will be to try to hack it and figure out if it's there. How do I work around it? I'm going to waste a whole lot of energy and potential productive time figuring out how to get this off my thing, or what are they doing, or speculating with it, or calling up on my unregistered phone and gossiping with my colleagues. I mean, it's just going to waste a whole bunch of time and cause more uncertainty and chaos. And it just, like, the more I think about this, the worse it gets. Yeah. But I know that I would try to hack it, because that's what you do, especially if you have any computer skills at all.
So one thing that will happen is there will be a surge in analog watch sales. So that you can put it under your mouse, and your mouse will think it's moving.
Well, in that Surfshark article, they make a Homer Simpson reference, and I don't know if you two know that one. Those little bird things that would just constantly do this. I don't know what they're called.
Motion?
I remember him putting it on a keyboard, and it just kept tapping the keyboard. So absolutely to the analog watch.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, I think it's a really important thing for businesses to understand that there are ways to find out if people are working without measuring it, right?
Yes.
Check in. Just check in. And,
Yep.
and people are afraid to do that. And I think that it's interesting to me that working from home because of the pandemic was very different from the working from home because we wanted to save jobs. The
Agreed.
pandemic, bosses were not sort of ready for that. We weren't prepared. Like in my group in the bank, we planned for this and we did it and we thought about it. Whereas this kind of happened suddenly, and they're reluctant to call each other or call out because it's invasive somehow to call somebody at home, right? Whereas if we're working at home and we have to do that, then we have to call it. But we're reluctant. If I'm sitting with you in a room with Andrew and I have a problem, I can go, Mike, what do you think about this, right? You're sitting there, so there you are. But I think I'm unlikely to call you if I'm sitting in Prince Edward Island and you're there in Waterloo. So, it's...
But it's amazing what happens when we simply go old school and pick up the phone.
Yeah.
Right? I do that with friends now, and they're like, "You're calling me." Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Right? Like, who does that anymore? But Susan, you said something, you said a couple times you've said it here, and you differentiate between check up, or how did you put it? You check up on them?
Rather check in.
Check in
rather than
versus
check
check out. How do you differentiate those two things?
I call you up and I ask you what you had for lunch, or I'm just kind of go, how you doing? It's not about, and they may raise some problem they have with their work, or they may not. But I mean, the checking up is like your weekly meeting or whatever, or reports or however people do their stuff. In my case, they were doing writing and they sent it to me when it was done. So I knew kind of what was going on. I knew if they were having problems that things would be slow, and then I might call to check up, but that would not be the same call.
Right.
And the call to check in was just kind of, hey, how you doing? I'm just calling to remind you to have lunch, because that was another thing that used to happen with work at home. You get all in this, and and I mean, we were pretty casual. I had really, really motivated people already. So, and they had been motivated by the work we were doing and my boss and me, perhaps. And so, but the deal was really, I know you're doing a good job, and I know that this isn't the easiest thing. But how's it going?
Yeah.
And the other thing that I also made sure that I did was let the people higher up than me know what my team was doing. Because once again, I didn't want them to be invisible.
Transparency.
Yeah. So I would just say, hey, this is what we've done. And maybe they thought I was a boasty, silly self-promotion person, but I was really proud of what they were doing. And I wanted people to know.
Absolutely. We don't do enough of that. So I think what I'm hearing, it's the difference between caring about the person and caring about the worker.
Yeah.
Both are about caring.
Yeah.
From a different perspective. Is that fair?
Could be, or it could be caring about the worker versus caring about the work. Either way, it's still about a person versus
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the challenge for some work environments is, how do you measure outcomes rather than outputs? So I think people who are interested in monitoring and measuring are pretty focused on outputs. Have you done this task? How many of these tasks have you done? Things that are measurable.
Is every story in Jira?
Let's be polite. But when something is done, when your work is done and it's done to everyone's satisfaction, it's usually an outcome that you've achieved in some way, shape, or form. And not necessarily some small contributing output.
Yeah.
But we're so focused on measuring in the small, and we've lost sight.
Well, it's easier.
Well, it is easier, and it's less feels less risky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I've been reading the management literature since about 1841, and all of the management literature talks about measuring outcomes or focusing on outcomes rather than output. And yet, there we are.
Yeah.
Because it's easier.
It is easier. It's easier to measure keystrokes and number of stories in Jira and whatever. But when it comes right down to it, the people that pay you as a company, your customer, what do they care about?
Yeah.
They don't care how many keystrokes happened.
Imagine trying to do a sales promotion like that.
Absolutely.
Think about it. The culture of your organization really makes a difference because there's all kinds of people that we know that will not shop at Walmart, for example, because of the reputed stories about how they treat their employees or various other things. And it's kind of like if I were able to show that my employees that I totally trust them, that would be way better than we're just one of the first we're one of the first early adopters of this software. Because in the article, or one of the articles I read, they actually listed some of the companies that were using it, and one of them was Remax, and I'm kind of like, what the heck have they got to measure? How many calls somebody made to try to sell a house that may or may not be for sale? Like,
but again, the outcome is the more important thing.
Yeah.
Right? The sale of the house. Yeah. Wow. There's just so many different ways we could go with this conversation.
It's crazy.
But we've already been talking for half an hour on this.
So
I think it's time to start bringing this to a close here. Final thoughts. So let's go, all three of us here. Final thoughts about Bossware and trust and, this complex thing.
My own thoughts are, I'm not going to be able to change the world anymore, but I am able to point it out now and then where it is going wrong. And I think that we who work in and around software have to really be, I used to be totally obsessed with usability, but I think we need to start talking about sensibility or ethicability, or we can do this, but should we?
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that software doesn't necessarily go to, because the kind of people that work in software is like, there's this really cool problem and I want to fix it and I can build a thing and do it. And isn't it neat? And it's, the nifty and the difficult, it becomes a challenge. Whereas what we really need to do is, does the world really need this product? And what product could we build that the world really needs?
Mm-hmm.
Speech over.
Thank you, Susan.
I don't know where the best leverage point is. People are going to build things that they think they can sell.
Mm.
And clearly people are buying this stuff. People are buying this stuff because they think it'll make them look good in their organizations in some way, shape, or form. And that's kind of the cycle that we need to break.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how you shame companies who are, installing this kind of product, which is essentially very misguided. And it's misguided because of the way in which they choose to manage. So
I've already gone to the sales pages and gone, who are our ideal customers? Like, these people have already bought from us, and then let's shame those people. But is that ethical, or is that just me being snotty?
I don't know. It's a problem that's compounding on itself.
Mm-hmm.
So they've already, in my mind anyway, and I'm being very judgmental, people in companies who are purchasing and installing the software are the product of a very dysfunctional company.
Mm.
So
this is a symptom, not the problem itself.
Yeah. I'm totally in line with what both of you said, especially the dysfunction. I think, if a company's going down the path of believing they need Bossware in order to keep track of their people, the people who are working remotely. Well, first off, don't let them work remotely then. You're better off to have them in the office where you can interact with the person without worrying about spying on them and whatever else, right? And yeah, that brings a whole different set of problems in today's world because people want to be working remotely. Not everybody, right? But there are a lot of people who do want to work remotely. The other part is if somebody watching this is a leader in an organization who's installed it, doesn't mean you need to strictly adhere to it and use it. Let's go back to what Susan said. Check in with your people, right? Connect with the person. Phone them once a day. How are you feeling today? Right? Like, where are you at? Like, did you have lunch today? Because I know how hard work you are, Susan. Right? Whatever it is. But do those things. You don't have to rely on these things, even if your company has
Yeah. That's a really good point, Mike. Just because it's there doesn't mean we have to use that.
Mm-hmm.
It's like cruise control on your car.
Exactly.
Some people like it, some people don't. I like to feel like I'm in control, and I like to keep my foot on the accelerator. You don't have to use it, and unless somebody's being rewarded for using it, then they don't. And if they do, then they have to ask why. And then that goes back to that bigger question of why does this organization feel it needs that?
Yeah, cultural.
But Susan said it almost off the top. Leaders have to go first. And it's these small acts of generosity, calling people up to check in with them. It takes no effort, but the impact it has is, wow, somebody is thinking about how I am, what I'm doing, how I am.
Yes.
And that's, I think over time, that's putting more marbles in the jar.
Talking about those people that used to call me, I would crawl all the way to Calgary over broken glass for those people. Right? Still, and it's been years. I don't even know if they're alive.
Sounds like trust.
Yeah.
All right. And on that word, thank you.
Thank you. Andrew. Fun talking with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like we could talk for another hour on these topics. So.
And many other.
Yes. Well, thank you very much for your time today and joining me here. And for everybody who's watching us, thank you so much for watching us. And please comment and message any of us directly. Yeah. Susan, Andrew, what's the best way if somebody wants to get a hold of you?
Email always works.
Sue@itsunderstood.com. Andrew@itsunderstood.com.
It sounds like a communication thing
right now, but the email works.
Yeah, it'll get to us.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today. And I look forward to talking to you two again soon. And I got to find a way to get there to get some of that lobster.
Take care.
Well, take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Bye.